Start with the end in mind. And I wanted to share a little story to exemplify what I mean when I say start with the end in mind. Many of you have heard me talk about how if you don't know where you're going, you won't know the steps to get there, or the steps to get there can't be presented to you. And so when I was laid off from Sony, I used to work at Sony Pictures Entertainment. And when our division was dissolved, from that experience, I knew that I didn't want to work in entertainment again. I wanted to use my powers for good. I knew that I wanted to work in nonprofit. I didn't know what nonprofit. I didn't know how I was going to get there because I knew the thinking for executives in nonprofit and hiring executives in nonprofit was different than in the private sector. So I knew, generally speaking, where I wanted to go. But like I said, I didn't know the exact steps to get there. I didn't know where I wanted to work. I wasn't even sure who I knew who worked in nonprofit, at least not at the time. But having that vision, having that endpoint, that general endpoint, I talk about either having an exact destination or at least having an intersection. I knew that I wanted to be at the intersection of nonprofit. The exact destination, i.e. the company or the organization, I didn't know. But being able to articulate that I wanted to work in nonprofit, that started the snowball effect. That started bringing in new awareness, new consciousness to me, where I was seeing different posts. I was getting inspiration of different people that I could connect with. And once other people in my network knew that that's what I wanted to do, then they were like, oh, have you thought about talking to so-and-so? Oh, I should connect you with so-and-so. And from that, the balls started rolling in the right direction. I started getting guidance on how to position myself for making the transition to nonprofit from the private sector. Because there's this thinking from people in nonprofit that people who come from the private sector think they know everything. They don't have, they don't have the heart for nonprofit. Now, once I got into nonprofit, I realized that it's just like working in the private sector. People are still the same wherever you go, but that's another story for another day. But again, by being able to articulate and having the courage to tell everyone in my network that this is what I was thinking of doing, I got the encouragement that I needed, certainly, but I started getting, again, the steps to get there. People telling me, companies that were hiring, people giving me guidance on other people that I could connect with, giving me guidance on ways to just slightly shift my resume or maybe my LinkedIn profile or the way that I'm reaching out to people. And ultimately, I did end up getting a job in nonprofit. It came from a connection. So this is another story about networking, which I will share at another time. But I connected with someone who actually came to Sony to present about the nonprofit that they were working at. And we did a little bit of help, a little bit of work for them, pro bono. But I stayed connected with that person. I didn't know at the time that I wanted to work at that nonprofit. I was just really interested in what they were doing. I was really moved by the work and the impact that they were having on young people. So I stayed in contact with the director of development, who ultimately ended up becoming my boss. But through the process of searching and focusing my job search on nonprofit roles in marketing, I saw a job posting about a director of marketing role at this particular nonprofit. I immediately reached out to my contact. I did not apply first. I reached out to my contact and said, hey, I noticed that this director of marketing role has come forward. We've talked about my experience. Do you think I should apply for this? And she was like, absolutely. Let me know when you apply. I will let HR know to flag your resume. Long story short, I went through the interview process and I was ultimately offered the role, and I worked at that organization for for 4 years, and it was an amazing experience that served as the launch pad to what I'm doing now. So the moral of the story is start with the end in mind. If you don't know where you want to go, a general endpoint of where you're wanting to land, it's going to be really hard for you to get the steps, the inspiration, the ideas, or even an awareness of the people who are already in your network who can help you. So start with the end in mind. Start today. Start small. Have the courage to name what it is that you want to do, where you want to go, and stay in the energy of that. Don't worry about how. Start being in the energy of where you're trying to go, what you're trying to do, and the how will start to present itself.